If we could all find our seats, we are about to start on the next speakers. Tom, can you close the door? Right, welcome back everyone. Very excited for our panel coming up next, led by Alison on building inclusion of transgender and non-binary people. Give them an applause. Is this
one working? Yes? Great. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Just first off, thank you for including us in this conference. I have never been to an ISTO conference, and it's really nice to be here. So thank you. First of all, I thought to introduce this session because I'm going to make a brief presentation, but then the meat of this session is actually with our panel. And I'm going to let the panel, first I'll introduce myself, and then I'll let the panel, we do have 3 who are joining virtually, introduce themselves. So I'll quickly start. My name's Alison Carney. My pronouns are she, her, and I am an independent consultant. I work with sport for development organizations, have for a long time, on gender, learning. My specialty is gender and inclusion, and this talk is coming out of doing a piece of research specifically on trans and non-binary inclusion. And I will pass on. Oh, great. Welcome, you 3. I'm going to pass to Frazer first and then to the 3 of you. All right? Great.
What's our question? Just name,
pronouns, your organization, and why this conversation is important.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Lovely to meet you all. Also my first time here. My name is Frazer. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I am the founder of the Queer Surf Club, which is a global community of LGBTQ+ surfers and allies. Why talking about this topic is important for me is because before we get to action, we have to start in discussion. So having a starting point as an industry to speak around these topics and issues. And I will pass to who? To Kat. Over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm Catryn. My pronouns are she, her, and I work for a rugby charity called School of Hard Knocks. And the reason that this work is so important to me and to School of Hard Knocks is because we have trans and non-binary participants, and we have a responsibility to make sure that they are supported as well as possible and feel that they can be their authentic selves while they're with us. Yeah, so that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Great. Kalyani, I'd like you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sorry we couldn't hear the earlier speaker for some strange reason. Yeah, hi, I'm Kalyani Subramanyam, and I work as the Chief Operating Officer at the NAS Foundation. We implement a Sport for Development program using netball with adolescent girls, and we also work exclusively with the LGBTQI community. But it's very strange that you're not able to integrate the two and really work as an inclusive program. So I think for us, how do you mainstream these conversations is the most important thing. It's only then that you can talk about inclusion and talk about an equal world. Nicci?
I don't know if it's just me, apologies, but I couldn't hear Kat and Kalyani, but I can hear you, Alison. Okay. I'm Nicci, and I'm from Waves for Change in South Africa, Cape Town. And yeah, I want to echo what Frazer said. I think why it's important to discuss inclusion, and why I think we participated in this project was to start with that platform, to start at an office and support hub and coaches level, have those discussions around ourselves and to prepare ourselves to be more inclusive. So it was a really cool project to be part of, and it just started helping us asking the right questions to prepare ourselves to be more inclusive.
Thanks, Nicci. Great. So panelists, I'm going to now do the brief presentation, and so you don't have to do anything at the moment. Can I leave this? I'm going to move over there. Great. And if we, oh, yes. All right. Before I start talking about my slides, I just wanted to share with you all the three, Kalyani, Catryn, and Nicci, who are joining, were part of the research that I mentioned. This was a piece of research which we have not quite released yet. I did it for the Laureus Sport for Good Foundation, which some of you may have heard of. If you have any questions about them, please come talk to me or write on the Whova app. And it was a first steps to trans and non-binary inclusion in sport piece of research. And so they're going to be talking based on their experience, but it's also why they're here on the panel, because the cool part of the research is what they had to say, I think. And Frazer, because he is amazing. So just to start this talk, they already shared why they think this conversation is important, but I think taking a step back, usually I talk generally about sport, but who has access to surfing? And one of the questions that I've asked a lot in my work, which has been primarily with gender equality in terms of girls and boys or men and women, is, are we promoting gender equality and equity? What does that mean? And are we really being inclusive? And who is left out? So now we're going to start talking about this in terms of gender diversity and transgender and non-binary and also the LGBTQIA plus community in general. But I also want to challenge you all to think which girls, who is being included beyond just the girls who live in the community we work in, the girls who are from a certain group of, who have two parents or who are white or who actually know how to swim. And I think those questions play into what we're going to talk about and are a really important first step to the work I do. The other area that a lot of this work comes from is I work with a learning community, which is a group of organizations funded by the Laureus Sport for Good Foundation, and they're all focused on gender equality. And it's similar to what you all are trying to do being a network. We exchange to try to learn and improve what we do. And when we started in 2015, the kind of joint goal that we had as a group was girls are not limited by their gender in future plans and et cetera. You can read this. And 2 years ago, right before starting this research, we had a discussion and decided to change that goal to this. No young person, in particular girls, are limited by their gender. And that was the very first seed of a conversation about, is talking about gender equality and equity just talking about girls and boys, or are there a lot more people that we need to be talking about? And so these were the organizations involved in the research that I carried out. And they all volunteered because they have either had trans or non-binary participants or have identified that they really want to start taking steps to be more inclusive. And 3 of them you've just heard from and we'll hear more from. But I just wanted to share that for reference, that this really is a global group that I looked at. And I should note, unlike an RCT, this is a very beginning level piece of research I did. So it's something that's opening a conversation. I would say that I'd get a lot of criticism about academic rigor, but I'm more interested in how do we give all of you tools and actions on what to do about this. So just to go through some of the key barriers that came out of these conversations, that trans inclusion has not been a priority because a lot of organizations don't have any LGBTQI plus identified staff members. And often those are the people who start conversations. A lot of us also talked about how coaches don't have the knowledge or the language to talk about or work well with the transgender, non-binary, and gender diverse or gender non-conforming community. And that creates a barrier. That organizations can have a fear of putting program participants in certain contexts at danger if they're talking about this. And that's a conversation we've had. And also that lack of information or knowledge and resources that are available to better serve the community. And to go quickly into what kind of the findings were, but also what to tee up what this panel will talk about, some of the actions that are being taken to start this process are trainings on gender diversity for staff, being more inclusive in the language we use, the logos we have, the images we use. How do we change that? Amending our policy to be more gender inclusive. The Wave Project, Joe is not in the room right now, but Joe came to this group that we created through this research, who we continue to talk together, and he shared with us how they changed their safeguarding policy to use more inclusive language and to be explicit about that. Partnering with local organizations who work with the trans community. If you're sitting there going, we don't have any trans participants, who does? Where are they? How can you make them feel welcome? Creating spaces that are exclusive for trans and LGBTQI youth can help be a way to make them feel more welcome, to start that process. Ensuring that facilities are safe and comfortable for everyone. I'm sure our panel will talk a little more about that. And starting conversations with families about gender diversity and supporting families. So I know that's really fast. I'm happy to open up to questions later, but I really want to get to our panel. These are just not high quality photos, but they were sent by some of the members of our group. This is Slum Soccer in India, and they're part of an initiative called Play Proud, and which has allowed them to partner with local LGBTQI organizations, which is the staff for the first time is learning the language around what is transgender? What are pronouns? What does cisgender mean? What are these things that we need to be thinking about? And this is just another adorable photo and example from our colleagues in Belfast, Active Communities Network in Belfast, who just decided to redo their logo. And they've had a lot of feedback from the young trans members of their programs saying, you know, we really wanted that. We wanted you to put the trans flag somewhere so that we know and we're getting this signal that you will be supportive of us. And an example, School of Hard Knocks, Catryn, who's here talking today, designed an entire internal training for the staff. And this is one of the slides that she has allowed me to share, just going through good practice and what does that look like for your team to be able to be more inclusive. And this is just me telling you that the research and the guide we created with the research will be available in November. I'm very, very sorry that I don't have it available yet. I wish that was in my hands. And I will come back to that slide. Okay. So that's all from me for my presentation. If we could go back to our panelists, that would be great. And what I'm going to do, I hope you can all hear me, the three of you. Nicci, yeah, everyone? Great. What I'm going to do is I have three prepared questions for the panel, which I think will get them to talk about some of the content of what I just mentioned, and then we'll open it up to all of you and anyone who's watching virtually. All right? So my first question to the panel, and shall we stick with the same order? Frazer, Catryn, Kalyani, Nicci? Is that all right? Great. So my first question is, what made you and your colleagues realize that you had to take action to be more inclusive of trans and non-binary individuals or the LGBTQI community in general?
I think my answers will be slightly different in the sense that from Queer Surf Club being solely for the community and not actually part of this research. So I just wanted to caveat that. But to answer the question, well, one, in being a queer male who grew up playing sport, I had a very real lived experience of exclusion and not feeling like I belong. And that was a very real reason for starting the Queer Surf Club and providing that space for the community. But then also, particularly within that, being a cisgendered, white, gay male, my identity has benefited the most out of a lot of queer movements, and particularly it is trans and non-binary communities who have created those movements and often who are most marginalized by society still. And even in Stonewall released a report in 2018 that almost half of trans folks have thought about taking their own life. And so as a surf practitioner in this space, designing a space with that community, the trans community first and foremost in mind, was really important. Go, Catryn, over to you.
Okay, so for us in School of Hard Knocks, we had trans and have trans participants, which is brilliant. But that also came with its own challenges. So it was really important for me that we understood first why they felt that this was a safe space to join. And some interesting conversations came out of that. Largely, it was a visibility thing. It was that the vast majority of people who were recruited into our programs were queer. And so automatically that gave the impression that we would be a safe space for queer people. The other thing was that we built a relationship with our participants, which, you know, we always try to do, and felt that we had the opportunity to really understand how we were providing our services and whether they were, you know, inclusive and what we could do better. And so we started to speak to our trans and non-binary participants and just ask them, look, what are we doing well? What are we not doing well? Because we felt the responsibility to make sure that, given that we were getting trans and non-binary participants in, which we were really proud of, we wanted to make sure that we were providing that safe space where, you know, their gender wasn't a barrier to them participating in any way, or wasn't something that they were anxious about at all. And going forward, we did some stuff, which I think will come under one of the next questions. We did some stuff to make sure that, you know, we improved our language and we purposefully went out to be more inclusive. And as a result of that, we've got a lot more trans and non-binary participants. And especially after lockdown with our schools program, a lot of our young people have come back to our program and now identify as trans and non-binary, which is brilliant. But again, we are now working with our schools and our other partners to make sure that some of the work we've done, and I mean really basic level work to just change our language, be more inclusive, and make those really quick and easy changes to make people feel that they're in a safe space and able to participate. And we're now trying to sort of share that information with our partners, and that's a really important piece of work that we're now sort of embarking on.
Yeah, and for NAS, we've been working on the issues of the LGBTQI community since inception, which is 25 years. And I think it's really a shame in many ways that we've not been able to mainstream the conversation. So on one hand, we run interventions, different kind of programs with the LGBTQI community. There are support services, counseling, interventions on the ground. But only when actually Ultimate Frisbee came to us and said, can you just help us run a Frisbee program with the trans community? And they said, we don't have access. And that's when it struck me, which says, we worked with this community for years. It's part of what we do. But it's two separate programs. We have a program for adolescent girls, which works with thousands of adolescent girls across the country. And we work with thousands of individuals from the LGBTQI community. But by design, they're mutually exclusive. So I think that really got us starting to say, it's so difficult to bring a regular, sport is fun for all. Who wouldn't want to play Frisbee? But just accessing the community and this sensitivity and this stereotypes was so difficult for them that we were able to intervene. And I think that really brought out to say, what would it look like when the trans community, non-binary, are able to access programs as a part of just a community program, which has no identification which says girls only, boys only, right? Girls only, boys only is so much more easier. What happens to this community which doesn't get excluded? I think that was my start point of thinking beyond to say, when we have the expertise, we're not able to do more. How do we then bring that value to the community? The second part was, we run a program with 20,000 adolescent girls a year, but in the country, expressing your sexuality is not encouraged. So we've just decriminalized homosexuality in 2018. We had a 17-year-old battle with the Indian government to decriminalize homosexuality. But a 8-year-old or 10-year-old cannot come out in the open and say, you know what, I identify as non-binary. There is no question. You are only girl or you're a boy. There is no other expression. So then in our programs, as we work with girls, where is that space for a girl who identifies as non-binary, who says, really, I am trans? There is no conversation around sexuality at all. So I think for us, this was really, how do we start creating those safe spaces where someone can be who they are? So I think designing for inclusion was really about saying, are there those spaces? Is there an understanding of how should the program design be, which allows and really thrives for inclusion, rather than saying so many participants come in? And I think our learning from the whole work with LGBTQI is helping us really train our coaches there. Over to you, Nicci.
Thank you. And sorry, Alison, I think when I introduced myself, I missed to just share my pronouns. Sorry about that. But they are she, her. And I think for us, really, it was a bit of a rude awakening. We were ahead of ourselves. We put on our consent forms and on our self-report for children or parents to put their gender in. We put boy, girl, or other. And when we observed children filling in those self-reports, some of them asked coaches, what does other mean? And the coaches weren't sure how to answer that question. And we also had some participants who filled in the other option. And when we captured those, we were like, that must have been either a very confusing experience or a very scary experience. If they saw there was another option, it might be something they struggled with. A coach couldn't answer the question, and now they've marked that box on a paper and there was no support or understanding. So I think that was like really kind of a rude awakening, that it was maybe clever to do that, but it was also not clever. So that was definitely the first time we realized whether there are children that define differently in our population, or whether it's something they're just grappling with. It's a conversation we want to open up. So that was the first thing. And I think the other one, all my colleagues have spoken about a safe space. And I think we all know that safe space means both physically, but more importantly, emotionally. And we realized that there might be children coming to our program with questions or with uncertainty, or they just want to share and be themselves. And our space is, I don't think, still safe for children who define differently to come and be themselves at our program. So I think those were the two main realizations where we realized whether we're actively recruiting or having referral partners sending us children that maybe define differently, we're not ready yet for those conversations or to have a safe space for those children. And we were just eager to learn from this study and from your work, Alison, how we can make our spaces safe.
Thank you, panel. Second question for all of you. What was the most important first step you took to, this can be to including trans and non-binary participants or to better supporting those you already had?
Great question. I'm going to answer this both personally as a practitioner and then from Queer Surf Club. For me personally as a surf practitioner, the first step was self-education and being okay and comfortable with the gaps that I had and pushing past that paralyzing fear of getting something wrong and doing something about it instead of just sitting in that fear. And then from Queer Surf Club, I mean, effectively the whole club was based around that premise. Our mission is to create inclusive surfing to save our oceans. We knew that the more people that we could get in the sea of different identities, the more people that will love the ocean, the more people that will help save it. Inclusivity is one of our core values. And inclusivity for us is about advocacy and being unapologetic, but also we have a community agreement. As we all connect on Slack, if anyone's used Slack for work. It's a bit corporate, but we use it. We use it to connect globally, and we have a channel with community agreements. And one of the things that we have in there is normalizing getting things wrong, because it came back to that point around me overcoming that fear of getting it wrong and making a start. And if we could all agree that we are not experts and we're all at a beginning point, then we are all starting from a place of inclusion because we're committing to learning and we're not going to come after each other and promote cancel culture. With that said, we are also okay with being called out when we get things wrong. So it's a mixture of the two. Over to you, Kat.
For us, I think the first step was speaking to our trans and non-binary participants and asking them what we were doing well, but also what we got wrong. And I think the second part of that is probably more important. And then obviously a priority was righting those wrongs and making sure that we communicated that with the rest of the teams to make sure that we weren't all making the same mistakes. And I totally agree. One of our, we sort of do it in the training. So we then went on to develop this feedback into some good practice training for all our delivery staff, our frontline staff. And when we developed this kind of 10 points of good practice that we would all adopt in our delivery. And it included things like pronouns, changing our language, our recruitment language, changing the language on our leaflets and on our websites, changing our imagery to make sure it was representative, and lots of other things. But a couple of the things, just to echo what you said, there was don't let the fear of getting it wrong stop you from trying. That was one of our main kind of commitments, I suppose, to being better. And the other one was that you haven't got to be an expert in this, and I definitely don't ever feel 100% confident when I'm speaking about this, and I would never back myself to not get it wrong. but it's about finding your own language and making that commitment that I might not always get it wrong, but I'm doing this and I'm committed to to being better and to making our programs more inclusive, and to support the trans and non-binary community to take part in rugby, but more specifically to feel like they our programs are a safe space for them, and that we're doing everything we can to support them. And like I said, that now going on, we also feel a responsibility to share that kind of knowledge and that good practice, because we've had such positive feedback from the relatively small and simple changes. I think that sometimes the fear of this stuff, I suppose if you'd have asked me 18 months ago, I would have thought, God, that's going to be a minefield. And yes, some of it's complex. I mean, we play a contact sport, of course. There are some areas of it that are quite complex, but actually the things that have the most, or that make the most impact, are quite simple changes that we can all make. And it's a great place to start. And I think that's what the group kind of reinforced for me. Being a part of the research group was just about, there's lots that we can do, and they're really simple changes, but they make such a massive difference to people feeling that, what we are providing is for them.
So I think for us, like I said, we worked so many years on this issue, I think that information and that understanding was not there across the organization. So even within an organization, you can be working in silos. So I think the start point for us was, how can we get everyone to understand it the same way? And I remember at the annual retreat, we said, okay, let all of us get really sensitized to saying, what does that mean? And luckily for us, we also have staff who belong to the transgender community. So we were able to get them really to share and honestly tell what it means. I think much of the discomfort is because most people don't know, because sexuality is such a difficult conversation in our country that if you ask, then there is a judgment to say, why do you want to know what's with you? So I think just the judgment in curiosity is so high in the country that many facilitators and coaches are very shy about it. And actually, when we engaged with each other and during the retreats, they shared what it meant, the biases, the stereotypes. People came back really sensitized and moved. And I think that sense of pride comes in only after that. Because then you start realizing that, one, what have we done wrong, but also what can we do right? Yeah. So I think that understanding piece was one most important. The second, I think it is about the attitude of the leadership. You know, when we are talking about such important issues, I do think it's very important for the senior leadership, for management to lead by example and talk openly about what inclusion really means. And especially for us, when we were working with 20,000 adolescent girls, you kind of think you have a badge of your own, which is, oh, wow, we are including girls. But that's not enough. So I think expressing our vulnerability, sharing the difficulties of not being able to engage this community, I had to really be open and say, it's not easy. So I think that attitude of the leadership becomes very, very critical. And then there are many practices like what they've already shared, talking about pronouns. There's nothing wrong in asking someone how you want to be called. You're not going to get it right from day one. So I think these conversations of how they want to dress, what's okay, what's not appropriate, it takes time. And I think the fact that when people have that space, then even if you go wrong, you can apologize and you can make changes. But the fact that we don't even talk about it was our challenge. So I think for us, it's about awareness, training, but about leadership attitude as well. Over to you, Nicci.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. I agree with all three, my co-panelists. I think our first step was probably to take a step back and to work. We've done quite a bit of work on gender in the organization, and I think we realized that it doesn't stop at boys and girls. Like you said, Alison, and we had to realize that if we want to be more inclusive of trans and non-binary people, we have to take a step back and make sure that our support staff and our coaches have awareness and information if we want to say we want to be more inclusive, to be able to facilitate a space that's understanding and non-judgmental and that's got the correct information. So our first step was to do values-based kind of exercises with our coaches around gender and around some of the norms and stereotypes, specifically in the communities where we are working. And first, just get an understanding of where our teams are at. If they require additional awareness or training or sensitization, if you want to call it that, just to make sure that we are all on the same page and that we're truly inclusive and that it's not tokenistic, and that if we're saying that we want to have these conversations with children and referral partners and parents, that we are truly set up for that. So that was definitely for us, is to just take a step back and first look at those that provide the service and make sure that they are all comfortable and have got the knowledge and awareness they need to start being more inclusive. Because I think the word inclusive has been obviously used a lot, and I just want to agree. I think Frazer said it. It's definitely also a value of Waves for Change to be more inclusive, and especially those that are left out and those that are marginalized. But we definitely realized we've got quite a long way to go. But we've taken step one, so it's a start.
Oh, that's where we're at, Nicci. That's why we're having these conversations. Thank you, panelists. I have one more question for the panel, and then we'll open it up to the group. So if while they're talking this time, you all want to put questions in the Whova app, that is a brilliant way to do this. Otherwise, I'll also ask after this for questions. So my final question is just, what is the biggest challenge, panel, that you're still facing? And I'll leave it at that.
Where do I start? Particularly in reference, I guess, to trans and non-binary community for Queer Surf Club, the two main things are representation and the systemic way of thinking. And what I mean by this, and actually I think I'll just share a story with you all. We had a meetup last month for the community on Perranporth, and I had a trans member of the community come for the first time to one of our meetups. They were sharing with me that they, until 2 weeks ago, they hadn't surfed in 10 years. And 10 years ago is when they first started their transition. And this person was saying to me that when they transitioned, they didn't think that they thought they had to leave parts of their identity behind. And one of those things was being a surfer. And until the meetup, she hadn't surfed in 10 years. One, it was a very emotional conversation, and even as I speak about it, I get quite emotional. But what I asked her was, why was that? And one of the things she shared was about representation, and even from Queer Surf Club, a group designed for LGBTQ+ folks, she still wasn't seeing herself represented through our program, our Instagram, our social media, which I try to do as much as I can, but I know there's still more to do. And the second thing then is around systemic way of thinking. And really, Queer Surf Club is here to try and dismantle a lot of the oppressive ways the surf industry is set up. And one of those things is how we binarize gender. And surf industry does binarize gender. Think about even how we have wetsuits. We literally have men's and women. So that as a starting point, before you even get in the sea, that experience that someone could have as trans as they start their transition, to be forced to choose a wetsuit is a very real gender dysphoria moment for them. So what I like to say, and what I always encourage, is we need to think of gender as a scale. And if you relate that to surfing, think of gender as your quiver of surfboards. Imagine if one day I said, Stuart, you could only surf a longboard now for the rest of your life, whereas actually next week you might want to surf a shortboard. And if we could all think of gender in that way, as a quiver of expression of how we like to express our surfing, the better. So that's my short answer, long answer. Kat, over to you, but I don't think you're there. Oh, no, you are there.
I've got two Jack Russells going bonkers in the background because somebody's knocking on my door. The timing is perfect. I was just going to share one of the challenges when we were doing the training for our staff was that one of the staff said, but have I got to guess which ones I think are non-binary and trans so that I can do this, you know, so I can tell them my pronouns and I can, and I think just my response to that was, if we do the work to you know, try and make what we do as inclusive as possible, you know, of gender and of everything else, then we won't ever have to do that. It will just mean that, you know, we will create a space where people don't have to out themselves to take part, or to, you know, to have that conversation about which changing room to use, because we've got an inclusive changing room, or people won't have to, you know, have the conversation about whether to come to the girl session or the boy session, because that's not how we identify our groups and our sessions anymore. And so just by doing the work first, you know, means that some of those fears that they were having around how to approach this were taking away. And like I said, this, you know, that just giving people the confidence that they needed to know that they haven't got to be perfect. They've just got to, you know, commit to being better. And that's made easy when you look at some of the first-hand experiences of trans and non-binary people, and unfortunately, you know, a large part of their experience of access and service, it won't be a positive, you know, experience. And when you share some of those stories, it just, you know, of course, everybody, you know, after hearing that was committed to being better, because, you know, as charities and as people who deliver services, you know, the last thing that people want to do is exclude a community that are already marginalized. And so I suppose the first thing is just getting everybody to agree and to make the commitment to do the work. Because actually, after you've done it, you know, some of the conversations and some of the feedback that we've had from our trans and non-binary young people, I mean, it's incredible. We had a guy at the end of one of our courses not so long ago say that it was the first time that you know, he hadn't been misgendered. It was the first time that he had been, you know, openly himself in a group, and how that wasn't even a thing because we'd introduced our pronouns and invited him to do the same, and that made just such an impact. We were lucky enough to be able to interview again, Alison and I, some of our participants in doing the research, and, you know, selfishly, it's lovely to hear that the changes that you know, that we have made a difference, because it made us all feel, you know, good about it, and that's okay. And actually, it's really important because it keeps that momentum up and the passion up for being better and continuing to improve and to find good practice and to share, you know, the changes that you've made with everybody else. So I think it's just, you know, it's really important that we did that work together, and it wasn't, you know, me, one of the queer members of staff driving it home because it was something important to me, but just getting, you know, everybody to realize that actually, you know, we can't be an inclusive service and still be marginalizing a whole, you know, group of people who could benefit from the opportunities that we create. So doing it together, yeah, that really made a difference, and it was fun. Kalyani.
I think for us, we also are, you know, when you look at it, one of the biggest challenges are most of the trans groups as well as non-binary groups, they're able to access programs very discreetly. It's all very undercover, right? It's hidden. So they have these, even if you look at the nightclubs, restaurants, everything is done in such a closed, you know, it's really undercovers. So if you're going to start a program where you're saying, wow, it's, you know, we really are open and please come, I don't think we're going to have drop-ins like that, especially in our country. So the fact is that access does not happen because just we are ready or the attitude is right. It's also about the society and the community supporting it. So I think as we design programs where we are saying we are going to be more inclusive, there is also a component of sensitivity and awareness training for the community in itself. Because if individuals, even I'm just saying, even within our adolescent girls program, even if you have one girl, you know, who looks a little different, there is so much of pressure on her to just blend in and not look, I mean, you can't look like a boy. How can you, right? So that in itself, there's so much judgment on that. So if you're going to talk about running programs where you're going to really include trans, non-binary, they can actually face more exclusion and stigma because of this. So how are we really going to work with the communities around, working with parental communities, working with who are those gatekeepers who are going to actively support us? So first, initially we also imagine that many of the programs may be exclusively even trans, but even that has not happened before. So I think this whole piece of awareness, by design, we need to think of how we're going to really sensitize communities and create an ecosystem so that inclusion happens. Yeah. Over to you, Nicci.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. I think that's probably one of our first barriers is definitely the communities where we work and who we work with and the referral partners and the parents and the schools. We've already, with conversations with schools have said to us there's no transgender or non-binary children in their schools. So it's not something they keen to explore with us. So that's a big barrier. It means that there's definitely conversations to be had. There's definitely some kind of awareness to be done long before we can say we can take referrals, or we do actively take referrals of children that define differently. I think the other one, it's alongside that, is with parents. So I think there's, in a lot of communities where we work, a sense that if we start these kind of conversations, it's Waves for Change that introduce this topic to children, not children looking for a space to have this conversation. So it is in some way, I guess, it feels risky because it might be perceived that we are exposing children to things they maybe have no clue of. But part of our work is to say your child or young people know already long ago. We just want to help them facilitate that conversation. So those are definitely barriers. And I think I've mentioned a couple of times, I definitely think a barrier at Waves for Change is those that run the sessions, coaches, those that support our team. We have some barriers in terms of our own awareness, our own knowledge, our judgment, all those kinds of factors I think that we need to address before we can be truly inclusive and truly create safe spaces. And then I think the last one is, I guess, very practical things. Frazer mentioned, for example, wetsuits. I mean, you can't hide behind a wetsuit. If there's anything you're uncomfortable with in your body or with your body, a participant might feel this wetsuit highlights that. It doesn't make me feel safe. So, it's something we have to think about with surf therapy, is to how to make sure that a wetsuit doesn't accentuate something someone's uncomfortable with, but it actually makes them feel more comfortable. And Kalyani also mentioned all of our sites are at public facilities. So the bathrooms, for example, are public bathrooms, and they're all male and female. And we have to start thinking around, if we've got children, that we say, you're welcome to come here. It doesn't matter how you define your gender. We have to have an option for them if they don't want to change in either a boys' or a girls' bathroom. And those are obviously very practical barriers that we have to figure out, but not impossible. A challenge we want to take on for sure.
I'm back. Oh, great. Thank you all. Every time I listen to this group, it's like, why am I up here? But one thing I will say is Frazer is a new addition to our kind of community of this group, but what happened through this research is we created what we've been calling the Trans Research Group, which I think we need to rename, everyone. But this exchange, this learning from each other, Kalyani telling the story of what's happening with the Frisbee team in India, Kat coming and saying, this is what happened when we renamed our courses from the boys course to the girls course to the mostly identified as female to mostly identified as male course. Those anecdotes, those actions is what helped everyone else start to think about these things. And I think Joe, who I now see in the back, would back me up on that. And the final thing I just wanted to say is I think there's a lot of talk about transgender in sport in elite sport in the media at the moment. And I just need to pay attention to that, because I think we, as this room, surf therapy practitioners and our panel who are practitioners of community sports and amateur sports, we have an opportunity to do what the elite sport institutions are failing to do. And I think, and I think that that's really cool, you guys. And I say guys because I'm American, not because I'm gendering all of you. Anyway, I will leave it at that, and I'd like to open up to questions. And as I opened up to questions, there's also a link in the chat part of your Whova that leads to something that I just wanted to later put up for all of you, which is if you have ideas of actions after listening to this, please put them in that link. It's just a link that will go to me, and I'll be able to share it with the whole group later. So I'll open up to questions from everyone.
Come and help.
Great, thank you, Becky.
I've got loads of questions, as you can imagine. Thank you all so much. So important to have these conversations. Thank you. So I'm going to start, unless there's anyone in the room that wants to start with a question. Tim.
Yeah, so I work for the Wave project here in Cornwall. It kind of was alluded to, but it was, I just don't know, basically. But is there a different way of expressing or talking about it or encouraging inclusivity between this kind of division between children and adults? Because we work with children predominantly, and it's just interesting to kind of think how to kind of breed that culture of inclusivity with parents of children rather than adults, or vice versa.
Who wants to take that? Kalyani.
No, I completely get the question, and we have a similar challenge. But I think it's much easier to talk to the children than the parents themselves, always. So I think the start point is really talking about larger conversations around sexuality and inclusion in itself. And I think that's one change which we are also going to do in our own curriculum, because how are you going to understand that better, because you're not doing those conversations at home. So I think one part is that with the children themselves, it is more about who you are and how your sexuality and your expression is important, and simultaneously conversations with adults with it, because I think children are really not too concerned about saying, oh, I am trans and binary. The fact that they have a space, and that's still the age when they're still discovering. Because, you know, I mean, when they're 12, 13, 14, you really don't know yourself. I mean, you may not know yourself even when you're in your 20s and your 30s. But I think that space to explore, then you need that time. So I think with children, it is more about inclusion, because it's then the inclusion is really a broad thing. It's not only around sexuality. Disability faces the more challenges than any other group I would have seen. You know, because by default, we sit in judgment and not include. So in our curriculum, I think it is about designing so that these issues are come where children really create that space for inclusion of every different expression. But with parents, it will mean deeper conversations around what does it mean when we have children, what would that expression mean, what their fears are around it. Because most of the parents have been socialized to believe it's abnormal and wrong. And you know, parents who have told me that what if my daughter suddenly becomes a lesbian now? And I was like, you know, you don't suddenly become anything. But I think that space, even the parents have missed it out. They've never had any session in their life which tells them what this means, right? So I think those conversations have to be different, but essentially the content is the same, but it is more tuned into say, where are the biases, where are those stereotypes? Yeah.
Thank you. That's a great answer. So we've got quite a few questions on the app. I'll start with one which you touched on, both Nicci and Frazer. Do you feel that swimwear and surfwear brands are inclusive? Which ones would you highlight as leaders in this area, if any?
There are none.
Hang on.
In
It's like an American brand, I think. Hello. There's a brand called Outplay, I think it is. Oh, I have to look it up, but it's quite inclusive, I think.
Okay, there you go. Write it down, everyone.
I would say, but also the mainstream surf houses and swim brands that dictate a lot of surf culture, who have a lot of persuasion in surf culture, are not. And that's okay. It's about what happens next, and incredible brands like this that come up that are helping progress surf culture.
Thank you. Another one from Hoover. Logistics question. Should we be adding our pronouns onto email footers, etc.? Who wants to answer that one? Kat.
Go Kat. Go on, Kat.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, absolutely. Why not? Mine's on my Zoom window, it's on my emails, it's on my social media. It's how I now introduce myself everywhere, because I've never had any negative feedback about that. The only ever feedback I've had is how lovely it is to see it, and how, you know, empowering it is to, you know, to provide people the opportunity to share those. And for some, it might be the first time that you know, that's happened, and the impact of that on somebody could be huge. So yeah, shove them on everything.
I just want to second that and say that I have had feedback in workshops where we're talking about gender, where people have said to me, it feels so nice to enter a space where it's easy because we're doing virtual workshops, so it's on the screen. You don't even have to go get a name tag or anything. And where I feel like even if everyone else here is cisgender, at least they're aware. And I think that that is really good feedback. It was really good feedback for me when dealing with this awkwardness of, I'm cisgender, do I constantly have to do this? And my answer, like Kat, is why not?
Brilliant, thank you. Oh, Kat's got something to add.
I was just going to say as well, it's also started, it's a really cool way to start a conversation if somebody does ask, why have you got that there? What does that mean? And actually, it's just a more organic way to start a conversation than let's talk about gender. So, you know, it's always good, isn't it, to have those conversations, and you never know when they're going to come. And that's the best thing about them, is when you're a young person might say, why have you put she and her after your name? Oh, well, actually, it's because of this. And just going back to the first question from the member of the audience, is that young people are so much more aware and inclusive, and, you know, have got so much to teach us about this stuff. Yeah, it's just on us to catch up, I think. which is brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you. Got one more question, and maybe Nicci touched on this one, so maybe Nicci wants to answer this one. By reaching out into different communities, how can you make sure you avoid tokenism?
That's a difficult question. To be honest, I think for us at Waves for Change, how we want to try and avoid it is to make sure that our sense of understanding, awareness, inclusion, to be non-judgmental is perfect. It can't be, but to make sure that all of us, if we say we're non-judgmental, if we say we're inclusive, if we say we understand or we're aware or we have educated ourselves, that that's true. And that's why I keep coming back to saying that our step back is to really work with our coaches and our support hub, because I think putting other on our consent forms and self-report was probably tokenistic, and we just want to make sure that option was there, and we could say to funders, yes, whatever a child defines as, they can tick a box on our forms. And I think that's when we realized, and we didn't even know how to answer that question or how to explain that. So I think for us, for me, and at Waves for Change, would be to first make sure when we use all these languages, and when we say we want children to come to a safe space, doesn't matter what they define as and how they see their own genders, to make sure that we truly understand that. And that takes away, we're just ticking a box, but that we really want to welcome you in our program because we've got empathy, or we've got understanding, or we've got awareness of the topic. But it's a good question.
Amazing, Nicci. Thank you for answering it. Brilliant. Thank you all so much. There's so many more questions on the Who app, so if all of the panel can jump on there and answer them, that would be fantastic. And obviously, if there's more questions and conversations you guys want to have, then please post them to this amazing panel. Sorry, Chris is waving her hand at me.
I just wanted to respond to that too.
Yeah.
I wanted to respond to that question.
Oh, sorry.
No, I mean, it's just such a cool question.
I'm coming.
Do I need the mic? Sorry. Hi, everyone. Nicci, I miss you. And it's so great to see this panel together. I just want to say, I have always said, as a woman, she, her, pronouns, don't give me a wave because I'm a girl, but don't take my wave because I'm a girl. So the way to not have tokenism as part of the story, the ISTO board has 2 LGBTQIA people who identify that way. It's about surrounding yourself with different and unique individuals. And the more that you surround yourself with everybody and evolve around, like, whether it's color, whether it's anything else, you will have those people be a part of your team and a part of the conversation because you have expanded your horizons. So I didn't go after LGBTQIA people. I just happened to surround myself by unique individuals in all of my life. And of course, I would want them as a part of my work world too. So just evolve and surround yourself with everybody, and this will be a part of the conversation. So thanks, everybody. Great conversation.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you guys so much. Goodbye. We'll say goodbye to everyone online. Thank you. Okay. Just taking a breather for a minute. I'm really excited to invite Yvette from Wave Wahines up to the stage to speak very shortly. She's just on her way up now. Yvette. Thank you. Go back next. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, wow, that's pretty freaky. So firstly, I'm actually just going to quickly pass this around to all of you. And if I could ask you to just take one and then pass it along. I'm just going to kill a few minutes of my talk. And whilst that's going on, if everyone else can you can definitely hear me and you can definitely see me. So you're just going to take a minute, mainly for me, to ground myself a little bit and center before I present to you guys. So I'd just like you to take a nice deep breath in. If you want to, feel free to look at the ocean. That's where I'm going to be focusing. And we're going to inhale with a nice, I choose to be present. So we're going to bring ourselves into the room, into the moment, and with me. Okay, and we're going to do that for a set of 3 waves. So we're going to inhale, I choose to be present. One more, inhale, I choose, exhale, to be present. And I'm here. Okay, I know that there's people watching from Groundswell, so they'll understand what that is. So I'm sure that you're giving me some waves of love, so I'm going to take them in now. If people do want to support, I actually can't click, so I feel really left out of the supportive clicking. But if you want to and you support what I'm saying, feel free to send a wave of love my way. Okay, thank you very much. Has everyone managed to get a item? Not yet?
Not this side, no.
Not that side. Quick, run! Go on, run, Joe. Go, go, go. Awesome. So once you do have your item, you can zone out, you can close your eyes, just feel it, see how it feels. What does it make you think of? I can probably give you some backstory that all of those bits are bits that have been collected by myself, by my 18-year-old, my 8-year-old, and my 3-year-old. All on the beach, all on litter picks, or all just looking for hidden gems, as we all have hidden gems of sea glass everywhere. I have my own one here, which I made in lockdown, and it's still with me every day. And for me, this signifies hope. So I'll be clutching it today, hoping that I don't fall over my words or fall on my face, either of those. So if you just focus for a minute on what you're feeling, what's going through your head, and just put all of that energy into whatever it is you're holding. Could it be you're feeling grief for something? Is it that you're feeling hopeful like me? Whatever that may be, just have a little moment to center. Okay, so if you're all in the room, I'll just talk a little bit about what we do and who I am. So I'm Yvette. I'll go a little bit more into who I am after I explain what we do. I run a club called Wave Wahines, which is a club for women and girls. We focus on community and building that female participation in surfing. We started 5 years ago now. We've just had our 5th birthday. And the idea was to support my 18-year-old. Well, she wasn't 18 at the time, she was 12. But she felt that she wanted to surf, and massive disclaimer here, I am terrible, everybody will know, but I can't surf, so therefore I couldn't teach her. But I do have my own business as a personal trainer. I do understand the value in sport, and I really understand that in particular when girls hit that sort of secondary school age, they drop out of that school sports system for so many different reasons that have been well publicised and researched. I didn't want my daughter to be that person. And I thought, we live in North Devon, we have to use what is available to us, and I can't be the only parent that feels that. And surfing, as much as people say to me it's a really accessible sport, it's really not accessible at all. It's only accessible if you're one of the ones who are accessing it really easily. And unfortunately, as a single mum, I couldn't afford £30 to £40 on surf lessons a week. So it was really important to us that we made the club cost effective, so it was just a case of covering the coaches who were in the water. My time was then and still is now completely voluntary. I just do it for the love and to see more girls getting into sport. We then worked a little bit more in the diversity field. Shock horror, not white. So for me it was really, really important that as a woman of colour, I'm in this really white, really male space. And I was like, oh God, that's pretty crazy. But you look around and there wasn't many other people like me. And the same with our participants. Out of 40 girls, we might have 3 or 4 that are sort of girls of colour and women of colour. So I thought, well, that's just not enough. What are we doing? Why aren't we reaching people? Obviously, North Devon demographically is not the best area to work in. But we thought we were going to reach out and do that. But I'll talk a little bit more about how that happened, because it was quite an exciting story. And then the more recent thing is surf therapy. I've known how great surfing is, just from being in the water and being terrible at it. But I love falling off, so thank God. So we recently branched out into that, and I came across Groundswell and trained with them as a surf therapy facilitator. But I will go on to that a little bit more. I hope you can't hear the rock clicking in my hand, that's my nerves. Okay, so I've bored you a little bit about my story. Kind of what we did as a club is we started for the girls, then we had lots of mums going, can we surf too? And I thought, okay, can I give another evening away for free? And I thought, actually, yes, because this is my peer group, you know. So, and they did ask specifically for it to be over 30s for some very good reasons. My mummy tum being one of the reasons. We kind of wanted to be with women who are our peers, who are our group, and who probably have very similar lived experiences. So we started with that, and that then created a really lovely community of women. And from my own experience, I had my 3rd daughter during sort of this particular program. And I remember being terrified to go back in the water. I was diagnosed with postnatal depression, and I was thinking, gosh, what's wrong with me? You know, I've had 2 other girls and it was all fine. What happened this time? And it was really, really hard to get my wetsuit back on and go back in the ocean. But what made me do it was, you know, everyone looks to me to kind of be that woman to go, no, let's all get together. So I had to. But then also the community that we'd built was so supportive and so loving. And I think that's part of the wonder of sort of those female spaces and being in the sea. It just let everything sort of, pardon the fun, but flow. It really did. So next we have Karma, who was one of our founding members and was and still is our head coach, former GB surfer. She's amazing. Again, if any of you know of her, she's had her own sort of traumatic history. She sadly was involved in quite a horrendous accident that put her on a recovery of, is she going to walk again? Is she going to surf again? And, you know, amazingly, a year later, she's back running our sessions and is just an absolute legend. We have Shona, who is in the back of the room here at the moment as well. She was our chief researcher and the driving force behind us doing our pilot program with domestic abuse victims. So we'll go into a little bit more about what we were doing with them shortly. And finally, last but definitely not least, my eldest daughter, Aaliyah, who is the inspiration behind the club and is now a fully qualified coach, lifeguard, and has recently flown the nest and is working at the Wave in Bristol. So yeah, so I'm super proud, and none of this would be here if it wasn't for her on the end. Okay, I'm not going to bore you with what trauma is because I'm pretty sure you all probably know it more than me. I'm not an expert in this field at all, but obviously there are a lot of different types of trauma. But the ones that we've been particularly focusing on with our sort of our club activities have been community trauma, which obviously has been as a result of war and displacement, and then trauma caused by domestic violence as well. Okay. Now this was just one of the quotes from one of our participants from our North Devon against domestic abuse. This was a lady who was in her 60s, who had moved away completely away from her family, her friends, her job. And she sat there on the beach and she had arthritis in both her knees. So even just getting to and from the beach was quite a struggle. And I remember her sitting there in the water because she didn't want to go in because the waves were quite scary, and we had one either side of her holding her up. And she finally realised that she could do it. And she sat on the shoreline afterwards, just letting the waves wash by her. And she just went, gosh, I feel like the rest of my life is worth something. And to get to somewhere in your 60s and feel that your life prior to that wasn't worthwhile it's just devastating to kind of feel that. And then to be that person who helps facilitate a program alongside Shona to provide that woman with that feeling of self-worth, that for me made it impossible to stop the program. We did the program for 3 weeks to coincide with Shona's research. She was researching for her dissertation, as her sort of area of expertise is sexual and domestic violence. Am I correct? Yeah, okay. So we worked together really, really quickly to put this together. When we met, it was a meeting of the minds, and then suddenly COVID struck and we couldn't really work together. And then the next minute we were like, right, okay, your dissertation's due. We need to get this research in. And so there was a lot of phone calls to, can you fund this? Can you support us? And I had all sorts of friends just handing me money just to put this 3-week program into action with Shona. And I think we both knew that that first session would be the first of many, and it certainly wouldn't be a 3-week program. But just for the purposes of her dissertation, we did our sort of pre and post questionnaires, which is very similar to Wave Project, but obviously in a really different setting. So it's a more sort of trauma-informed setting. But she's the expert in that, not me. I'm just kind of there as a support. And funding. So as we all know, and so many people before me have said it, research does get funding. So having her do this as a really documented piece of research for her dissertation is absolutely vital for us being able to run more programs, and also for other people to run similar programs. So we're hoping that that dissertation will be published, but I'm sure you can speak to Shona about all that a bit later. Sorry, Shona. She's going to regret walking in now. So why surfing? Again, it's naturally therapeutic. It takes the onus off of the person. You're not in a room having a discussion. You're somewhere that's really freeing, that forces you to be in that present, in that moment. You know, trauma, what it does is it tries to rip you out of something and take you somewhere else. Whereas being in the ocean doesn't let you do that. You're having to be exactly where you are. So that's why it's so easy to create surfing into this sort of space of safety, which is exactly that. So, and again, I think Frazer sort of highlighted that point, and we're really similar in that if we can get more people in the ocean, it's fantastic for their mental well-being, their physical well-being, but it's really good for Mother Ocean. You know, the more people that love her, the more people want to protect her. Therefore, they're more engaged in conservation, they're more engaged in looking at what's going around in their environment around them. So it's a win-win. And again, you're all experts in this field already, so I don't need to sort of tell you what kind of benefits these sessions do enable. Okay, obviously, for us, the interpersonal skills is huge. You're building a lot of trust with these women. We have a circle at the beginning of our sessions, and we all sort of sit down, and that's including volunteers, including the participants and the coaches, is we'll sit down together and discuss sort of where we are that day, how we're feeling, what's been going on, and it's just ensuring that the women who are participating know that they're in a really safe environment, because it does bring up quite a lot of emotion. There's always been a lot of tears, and that's just me when I go home. But it's a really, really amazing space to be with these women, and it's just creating that area where they feel that they're not going to be judged. And yeah, I don't need to go into that because it's just devastating that, yeah, lockdown did so much to so many of us. It forced me to become a rock painting expert and baking. But for some, it was far more traumatic. I use that lightly, but it was horrendous. So, and then 3 weeks later, there is the lovely Shona. We sat down at our closing circle to discuss how the women had found the 3 weeks. And I remember that one because it was really lovely. We have support workers from the refuge that come with us to these sessions. So, because obviously they are more akin to the women's emotional needs. So they're there as a backup and as that resource. And we were all sat in our circle talking, and one of the girls, or one of the women who has 3 children, she said, "I feel like you've given me control back. I feel that you're saving lives." And that's like insane. Just me, who just dreamt this thing up from my daughter, has suddenly gone a few steps further, and then someone's telling me that I'm saving a life. It's just, there's a lot of that. And even for the women who work at the refuge, they were in tears because they don't see their women in that situation ever. They see them when they're in refuge and they're struggling with lawyers or with their kids or with finding a job or with messages back and forth with their sort of partners, trying not to disclose where they've been resettled because they're always resettled out of area. So these are women that have come from miles and miles away into our county. So for them as sort of support workers, they never see the fun side of it. They just see the trauma and the stress, and obviously, you know, there has to be that because they have to be in that safe space. But for the women who work with them, they just said it was just such a delight to see them actually having fun and smiling and doing something that just didn't involve lawyers and arguments and stress. So it's been a really lovely journey, but it has ensured that we are now seeking so much more funding. So because we just can't stop this project at all. And yeah, back to trust. We are trusting the process. Now, trusting the process leads me neatly onto diversity. I think Jazz will know, but I obviously look around and see, okay, it's a very white sport. It's very historically been a white sport. And this was discussed, and all the horrendous incidents in America in lockdown obviously brought all that racial tension to everybody's surface, and it put it into everybody's thought process. Maybe we had more time at home, so we couldn't switch things off. It was always there. But obviously I think for myself, I found it really hard. I found it emotionally really challenging to see the news, to see what was happening, to see that unrest. And it sort of took me back to, gosh, the LA riots with Rodney King as well. And I thought, in all that time, we're still having these same conversations, and I found it so emotional. And surfing had that conversation as well. And I was lucky enough to be part of those conversations with sort of Black Girl Surf and having that discussion about how we can be more ethnically diverse within what is a not very diverse community. So we then put out this sort of call to arms, and we had a report done with the BBC about sort of that particular project. And then a few of you will know that I then got absolutely horrendous racial trolling as a result of that piece going to news. So I had like a major sort of media blackout. Luckily, I've got friends who are quite academic, and Chris Tacoma and Dr. Rebecca Olive and Sophie Hellier, who then went in and sort of fought for me and formed this really lovely buffer of that. And they just blinded everyone with sort of science and why it's just not appropriate what they were saying. Obviously, for me, I found it really devastating and went, oh, do I really want to do this? I don't want to put my head that far above a parapet. And so I spoke to my dad, who is from Mauritius, and he came here as part of the Windrush generation to help build that NHS, and worked in psychiatric care quite a lot. And he said to me that actually when he was working in the NHS, there was no room for progression, and it was just because of his colour. Said, don't worry, we're not going to ever promote someone like you. And I was like, oh my gosh. And my dad said, look, this was over fish and chips, you know. And he said, the fact that we're having this conversation over fish and chips says how far we've come. So I couldn't have had that conversation with my peers at that point in time. But he says, you can have it now. And it just made me go, okay, however scared I am and however I don't like to be attacked for my heritage, which I'm incredibly proud of, I just realised actually I've got a place, so my little voice needs to say, this is not okay and this will not be accepted. I'd be doing him a massive disservice if I didn't push that argument forwards. So we then applied to Sport England and Active Devon for funding as part of their Tackling Inequalities Fund. And we got it, which was amazing. So we put the call out locally to run this diversity programme, and we had lots of volunteers, because we basically said we need volunteers and we need participants. So we reached out to a couple of organisations, and then we contacted Pickwell Foundation, which they run many of the community sponsorship programmes with local refugees. And I only knew at that time of one local Syrian family that had been in the country for maybe 4 years. I had no idea there were so many in North Devon. Suddenly, our spaces for, I think we had space for like, it might have been 8. Suddenly we had 11 Syrian refugee girls aged between 5 and 11. And so to me, that was mind-blowing. That was not the audience I was prepared for. Suddenly threw that curveball of, okay, now we've got community trauma. Now we have language barriers. Now we have culture. We have all these things that I was like, okay, yeah, that wasn't what I was expecting. Now what? So immediately it was, yes, of course we can run this with these girls. Culturally, we'll ensure that you have female coaches, you have all female volunteers, just because we have to be respectful of everyone's culture. That's really important to what we do. And we made sure that it was one-on-one. We had heard that some of these girls had never been in the ocean. So yeah, it was an interesting curveball to be thrown, but nonetheless, I trusted the process. So, whereas with the North Devon Against Domestic Abuse, we focus on circle, on trauma, on that evaluation and having those discussions. This wasn't going to work with a group of young girls who don't understand English. So it was only about two things, fun and safety and fun. That was all. That was our remit, which I was quite happy to work with. And this, will it play? Oh, sorry. I love that. Thank you. Thank you, them. Yeah, as you can see, that brings such a smile to my face. Obviously, we knew that these families had been through such trauma, but we obviously don't know every individual history, and we wouldn't be sort of sharing that with you now. But we obviously knew that these families, one in particular, had sort of, they'd fled, thank you, fled Syria in the middle of the night at the beginning of that sort of civil uprising. They then managed to get themselves on a coach and got to a refugee camp. They then spent several months within that refugee camp to then be resettled in a refugee settlement in Lebanon. Now, I don't know how much you might have read and stuff. I certainly hadn't read as much on refugees and Syrian refugees as I have now. And it's definitely to my betterment having done that. But these were horrible places. These are communal living areas where you don't know who's living in the place next door. They often don't have doors, open sewage. It's just places they're just shoved and left, okay? They're left there while there's paperwork filling in. They're left there while they're being assessed for, can these people be rehoused? Can they be resettled in another country? That can take such a long time. So one family, they did come over, and then I remember another member of their family finally made it here earlier this year after 4 years of being in one of these places in Lebanon. 4 years. And do you know why they spent 4 years there? 2 words. Donald Trump. Yeah. They were due to actually be resettled in America. Donald Trump came into power, stopped all immigration. So they had to stay with their children in these awful, squalid conditions. Finally, after much debate and legal wrangling, as I'm sure sort of Jazz will know, working with the Pickar Foundation, finally were successful in bringing them over. And they then came surfing with us, which was absolutely insane. I've seen sort of Jazz crying over there, and I'm trying not to catch her eye. But Carolyn, who's been doing photos at the back, actually, she was one of our photographers for that first session. And whilst we were in the water coaching, or trying to get people in the water, because I know a particular girl with me called Rama had never set foot in the ocean and was terrified. And I remember, I'll talk about it on the next slide, actually. 3 words, that's all. Oh, and I forgot a space. Sorry, guys, grammar police. Yeah, 3 words, I've got you. So I've got three daughters. I've had my fair share of nightmares, night terrors, cuts, bruises, everything else. And as a mum, the only thing I've ever been able to do, because I can't take away the pain as much as I want to, I can hug them and I can tell them that I've got them. That's all I can do. Thank you. So that was really such an overused phrase. Thank you. But I don't think you can ever overuse it. And I remember this particular young lady, Sarah, also had never been in the ocean and also had a visual impairment, or has a visual impairment. So she was terrified and she didn't understand a word we were saying. But I think someone mentioned it on the yesterday, that it doesn't matter. The language really doesn't matter, especially when you're dealing with children, because it's tone. It's tone, and the language of the sea that is international. We all know it. And I remember just holding her hands and just going, I've got you, I've got you. And she clearly knew that I was doing something that was positive. I wasn't going to hurt her. But the level of trust that must have, coming from whatever these girls have had to endure, and I don't even want to imagine. But to then be able to hold my hand and put their life in my hand over something so terrifying is probably the most humbling thing I have ever gotten to be part of. And these are some of our lovely girls. And you know, I think the one thing, and Jazz will back me up, is the confidence that they grew in over the weeks of coaching with them. Even though, you know, for some of them language was really tough, they were just getting so much more confident. The reason I know this is, again, from having daughters, oh my God, they got so naughty. So naughty. And I always think, especially with kids, that's such a sign of comfort, because you, as a child, you buck the system when you feel safe to buck the system. And they clearly felt safe because suddenly, you know, in the beginning of the sessions, they would stay close to you and they would be clinging onto you, and you'd be like, okay, it's all right, you're going to be safe, you're going to be fine. They wouldn't want you to go too far, or they wouldn't want to let go of a hand, and they definitely understood what that meant or what this meant. Suddenly, by like week 3 or 4 out of, I think, 8, they were just like, yeah, no. You'd be like, come here. They'd be like, I don't know what that means. You know, suddenly you're like, hang on a second. So, and I love that. And they're busy chucking sand and splashing in the water. Occasionally we got them on boards, as you saw in the video. But mostly it was just about confidence and about playing, because we just don't play enough. And they're kids. That's all they should be doing. Oh, what next? Oh my God, I'm really bad with my spacing, aren't I? Crikey. Sorry. So yeah, what next for us? Lots more trauma-informed spaces, we hope, going into next year. Obviously, we're now running into our winter programme, which for our girls entails indoor sports and swim training and everything like that. We are now looking with the Refuge as a trainer already, as to offering them sports sessions within Refuge, just because I can't bear the thought of not having that contact for, 4 months. I think it's not good for them, it's not good for me. It's really nice to keep that relationship going. And the same with our Syrian refugees. We really want to continue surfing with them at the beginning of the season, but we also want that to be a progression, so they join our surf club, our normal weekly Wahines. We kind of don't want it to be, this is just like for you guys and this is for you guys. We want to really integrate that. But at the moment, they're just confidence-wise, they're not in that space that it would be safe for them. And as much as we're a club for women and girls, I've been desperately trying to get one of the dads, or i.e. my fiance actually, is probably going to be booted into doing one for the boys, because culturally that's been really challenging. And I've had limited conversations and kind of guessing with the girls that their brothers all come to the beach quite often. And unless they're taken off sort of to play football or to do something else, the boys want to be involved, because as a culture, they don't understand why this is just for girls. Because normally it's a very patriarchal society. So normally the stuff is actually for the boys and the men, and the women and girls are kind of just there. But this is just for their sisters. And I think that's been really difficult for them to understand. They just want to get involved. And obviously we want to create that space that the girls can just be themselves without their brothers. So I think it's going to put us in a place where we do need to do something for their brothers to just keep them busy and just give them both safe spaces where they're both getting the benefits of being in the ocean, but they're not sort of having to buck against each other as well. So hopefully that will be a watch this space. And yeah, finally, I'm so lucky to get to be in the middle of these 2 roses. What a thorn. But yeah, our motto, and it will always be to surf like a girl, because it's pretty damn good. Although not me, not this particular girl, I'm not very good. Yeah, we'll pick Steph Gilmore or Carissa Moore instead. But yeah, thank you for listening. And see, I told you I promised an early lunch.
Juggling with the little shell I got from you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Yvette. That was an incredible talk. Super inspiring. Let me just see if we have a question for you. not a question, just want to say thank you for your power, passion, and amazing work here. A few replies. And then there is another question. What is the cost associated with joining the surf club?
Our sessions run, they're £10 a session for our regular surfers. We're currently working with the local sports partnership, Active Devon, and they've given us funding to work with girls who are at risk of offending, and that will be completely complimentary. And we're hoping that if we can get funding like that, we can start to bring down the other costs as well.
Thanks. Any questions in the audience?
Could I?
Yeah, coming to you.
Obviously, everything's changed during lockdown, so I don't know how much, but obviously, are you aware of any new refugees kind of coming over, to which could be kind of facilitated in your local area by your programme? And is there space to facilitate new girls and women?
Yes, there is. We actually had a couple of families arrive during lockdown, am I correct in saying that, that did come and surf with us as soon as they were sort of out of their quarantine periods and were allowed to. So yeah, we immediately started integrating them into our programme. We're really fortunate that Surf Southwest, who we do work with, are always really accommodating and helpful to what we do as a club. So, and we've got a really great volunteer basis, so we did have the capacity to add more. So I think we did get up to sort of 11 participants, and next year we're just going to be able to up that, I think, to maybe 16, but it just depends on the level of demand.
Any more questions in the audience? Yes.
Yeah, just to say, great work that you do. I think it's really interesting. Just be interesting to know what you think was the biggest cultural adaptation you had to put in place for the refugee kids, if we have refugee kids. What's the number one thing we should be thinking about?
We had to, language was massive. Culturally, we were with girls, so we had to ensure that all our coaches were female, which, sounds really simple to do, but in surf culture, actually, ensuring that there's all female coaches and all female volunteers is quite a challenging thing to do. So it would be great to see that improve. Also, changing facilities was really important, ensuring that they had somewhere to go and get changed in private, offering them, bigger wetsuits, or allowing them to keep their sort of shorts and t-shirts on underneath the wetsuits. They didn't have to actually get into swimwear at all, because many of them didn't come with swimwear, obviously. They're not, they've come straight from a refugee camp. So we helped, so through the charity, they supplied them with all of that. And we just made sure that we were putting them in sort of bigger wetsuits and made them feel comfortable. And we're hoping, I think we'd contacted Finisterre. We were talking with them about their sea suit, because we'd be really interested to talk to the mums more, because we really wanted to get the mums involved, and they all wanted to get in the sea. And what we obviously don't show on any of our pictures publicly, but we have them privately, is the mums getting in the ocean, just kind of up to their legs. But culturally, that obviously would never ever happen, and would be, it wouldn't be really sort of good for them to be exposed having done that. But the feeling they always wanted to be in the water was so telling. So for us, we'd really like to sort of be able to offer them something that covers their modesty, makes them feel safer, makes them feel more secure. So we'd really like to get some of the mums to come in the water too. And obviously I think that would be the only way to facilitate it, because I don't really think the wetsuits without that modesty cover are going to be an option.
Thanks. I've got another question on Hoover. Do you think community trauma will include COVID-19 recovery now?
100%. Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah, definitely. Our weekly club, obviously, since we've come out of COVID, the demand's risen so much. But even pre-COVID, we knew the therapeutic benefits of the girls we surf with, either from they're autistic, and we've had so many reports about that today, that it really does help. Or we have girls that have bereaved parents, and it's just been an amazing thing to do. But I think coming out of COVID-19, it's definitely we have to keep that sort of momentum going, and whether it's that we manage to offer more sessions, because we are massively oversubscribed. We can have up to 40 girls in the ocean at one time, and that's amazing, but obviously quite a lot. So, and that's still, demand is growing. So I think, yeah, we'll have to start looking at expanding.
Someone, yeah, two more in the audience.
Sorry, you might not be able to answer this because I know it's currently being marked / it will be published soon. But can you share the key takeaways from what you found in the research?
I can share the one takeaway so far that Shona shared with me. Obviously, she'll be the one you want to grab for more in-depth details. But I do recognise that actually the women, the talking was a really, really key part of it. The sessions where we ensured we had that pre-circle and post-circle, they were the ones that were massively advantageous, because we go in the water anyway without the surfboards just to connect and feel that vibe of the ocean before we even think about boards. It's not essential. But they did say that actually having those safe circles together, that was a necessity for the programme.
So thank you so much. It was deeply inspiring to hear you. We were actually also contacted about working with refugees in Portugal, but one of the issues that was raised was the fact that, you know, a lot of them actually had to do the crossing in, you know, and the sea could be a deeply traumatic atmosphere. And I was just wondering if you know, gave some thought into that,
yes.
Or how did you sort of...
We did, actually, yeah. We did. Obviously, we don't know the full histories of everybody's arrival here, so we were very mindful that that could have been on water. And there was one particular girl, Rama, who had never been in the water and was really scared, and I'm not sure sort of what that fear was from, but obviously that could have been. But the pressure wasn't ever to, you have to be in the water. It was, let's just sit here. Because I remember with her, we sat further back just from the break, so we weren't even in the water, and we maybe stayed there for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then we sort of shuffled a little bit further forwards, and we shuffled a little bit further forwards more, and then it kind of touched her feet, and it was like, okay, this isn't so bad. So it's just taking those really, really small steps, and not that, which is why it had to be one-to-one, because it had to be that, you know, if you wanted to stay on the beach, to just be near the sea, for some of them that would have been enough. And I think it's just being aware that they may have that relationship with the ocean, and not to put the pressure on them to take it at their speed and let them guide you.
We have one more question on Hoover. We've just run a program for Syrian refugees in Northern Ireland, and unexpectedly they were all male. Any tips for starting conversations with the families about the females doing a program with us? I'm anticipating some barriers in attitude because of culture.
Yeah, it's culture. It's definitely the cultural barriers. So I think really looking at who's delivering the program is super important. So ensuring that it is female coaches delivering it, it is female volunteers delivering it, and that it's not a mixed group. So it's not going to be, I know obviously we've literally just come out of a conversation about not splitting genders. So I'm really aware of that, and this is, really so. But there's also that cultural thing that we need to take into account when you are working with refugees. And if you want them to engage with you, you need to you can't expect them to come all your way. You have to take that step and meet in the middle somewhere. And so for us, it might be that we don't like girls and boys, sort of that gendering, but culturally we want them both to be in the water with us. So I would strongly suggest that having that separate sort of gender balance is really integral, and generally talking to the father, or if that message can be taken through to the father who will be the head of the family, ensuring that he's very aware that it's female delivered in a female only space is huge. So that's my advice.
Thanks. One last question on the Hoover app. Did you?
I didn't realise I was that interesting. Oh my God.
Did you have to provide any sort of swim instruction for women or girls before they start the surf clinic?
No, and none of them can swim. One can swim. So none of them were swimmers. Obviously, several had never seen the ocean. So no, we didn't provide them with any swimming lessons, mainly because we knew that we were never going to go further than this deep. So thigh deep to them, not to us. Yeah, so they didn't need to be able to swim. And we had that one-on-one volunteering. So if there was at any point, and sometimes we had 2-to-1 volunteering, so you had a catcher. So there was never any point that they would have been under the water. So it was a really, really safe way. Although they did start wanting to learn to swim at the end of it. So that was really nice.
All right, one last question from the audience. Anyone would like to ask another question? It's been enough as well, hasn't it? It's been quite a few questions. Thank you so much, Yvette. Thanks. And before I let you go off to lunch, Emma kindly offered to finish her presentation that she didn't get to finish yesterday. Today, after our last speakers. Yes, snap on that. So if you'd like to stick around for that, we're going to be here listening to the rest of it. Thanks, Emma. It will also be recorded, yeah. All right, with that, sending you off to lunch and see you back here in an hour and 15 minutes.